conferences. Adriana.
Not daily.
I mean, that was a joke.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Hey, Adriana Cotero. Good morning, Adriana.
Good morning. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
So I know.
A nice joke there. Nice laugh early.
Right. You know, I'm always trying to brighten you guys' day. So anything there that we discussed with the major that caught your attention that maybe you want to follow up on, or?
Well, yeah. So I was just listening in right now, and I heard that they had another interception, which they mentioned, which I think, just within the span of COVID, from what I can recall, I think that might be the third that they have reported on. So that would be something I could potentially just follow up and ask him a little bit further in detail, or if there has been any if they're seeing some sort of increase with that, because I don't really recall. I mean, I was always in close communications, of course, with Anton, and prior I don't recall reporting 3 interceptions within the span of like a month and a half. So that would be something I could, follow up. And then I know that you guys had mentioned the asking him about the Freedom Choice bill, which I think today when I cover the Mayor's Council of Guam, that might be something that they plan to discuss as well.
Right.
And I heard you asking him about that, and we did a story on that yesterday as well.
What about Guam Police Department? What have you been tracking with the GPD? We're getting Sergeant DePaulo on later. Is there anything of interest that you might want us to bring up with him that you've been following?
Well, I had mentioned to you, Chris, because I figured you were going to have him on, but just that there may have been some more school break-ins that we heard about. So I was wanting to ask him about it, but possibly at Untalan, that there may have been a few more within last week. And then, even in the beginning of the pandemic, when schools started closing early, we saw a lot of break-ins happening. So just following up on that, if there's been an increase with that. And additionally, we know that there was a death investigation underway that just happened earlier this week. And I asked him for an update yesterday, but I didn't hear back from him yet. So that would be something else that we could ask him, see what's resulted from that.
Okay, we will. Adriana, just kind of looking forward, what are some of the things that you're working on for today that we can expect to see on the news either tonight or in the next couple days?
Well, so yesterday I kind of shifted gears a little bit more to some education that I could highlight on, but they had the very first grad and go ceremony.
Right.
So that was very interesting. I was almost semi-emotional a little bit there at the ceremony, because I was like, wow, it's still so beautiful. Everyone's so happy and cheerful, despite the circumstances. And even talking to the students, you could see them smiling, even though they had masks on. So, and even the parents cheering from their cars. It was like nothing I ever thought I'd ever see before in my life. So it was beautiful to see and witness. But the kids are pushing through, and all the students are, and they essentially kind of came up with this idea, right? Because GDOE, they were faced with the challenge, and they asked the students how they would want to hold the ceremony, and this is kind of what came to fruition. But they were thinking about even just doing a virtual, all online, but they made it possible. So there was 332 students yesterday with over at Okadu High School that graduated, the Bulldogs. So they were the very first, and there, as far as I know, through GDOE, there isn't a grad and go ceremony today, but tomorrow there will be. I believe it's later in the day, but so that'll be the next one, and that's at JFK.
Right. So we're playing the video here, Adriana. Wow, this is really cool.
It's nice.
I mean, these kids,
isn't it?
I mean, they were just so shook about obviously not being able to have the ceremony. And I mean, although this isn't the ceremony they're used to, it definitely looks like it was more than good enough for the time.
Exactly. And like everyone's spirits were still high. That's why I was like, they could have been all sad and mad and moping about it, but they were still just so excited, and they still are. They're just ready to get their future started, and they just can't wait for their next chapter of life. So I was like, wow, this is inspiring. If these students are still happy, looking forward to every single day, and they're making the best out of it, I think everyone else can too.
Right.
And then I also spoke with Catholic schools yesterday. So just determining, so they didn't close school early, right? They the Catholic private schools, they continued on with distance learning. And
you mean the parents continued on with distance learning?
Yeah, they did. So they did all the way until last week, I believe it was last week, where is what Dr. Juan Flores, the superintendent of Catholic schools, said that their school year just finished last week, and now they're starting to think about the fall, and they're kind of going through three options right now. They've narrowed it down to three options. So one would be either enhancing, and it all comes down to, of course, where we're at with coronavirus and if we're in peak core 3 or peak core 4 by the time. But he said one end of the spectrum is continuing distance learning throughout the year and enhancing the program. The other option is having all the way back to school, and having in school, just making adjustments with social distancing and sanitization. But the option that they're looking at the most is a combination of the two. So that means having classes down to like 10 to 15 kids, maybe doing it every other day or every other week, switching it in and out. So then half the students so like typically they said they have like 20 kids in a class. So then like 10 of those kids would stay home that day, work from home, or work elsewhere in the building doing online coursework. And then the other 10 would be in this classroom doing coursework. And then the next day they switch, or the next week they switch. So that's the option that they're kind of looking at right now. But he mentioned that they're in close communications with GDOE and kind of following them because one, transportation, the bus schedule. So that's something they would also have to factor in and decide, because also following, social distancing guidelines with buses too.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was like, that's something I hadn't even really thought about at all. I was like, oh yeah, buses, and so many people, they need the buses. They need the buses in order for transportation. So I was like, I even had asked Dr. Flores. I was like, yeah, I didn't even think like how would we even do everything with buses, like social distancing, making sure like everything's sanitized. And he was like, that's just another thing that we've been following. So.
Did Mr. Flores say anything about extending the school year, perhaps starting in July?
So I asked him about that because we know that there was a survey that went out to St. Anthony Catholic schools, and I think they had asked parents and maybe yourself, Bree, about it. asking about it, and I did ask him. He said that it was just a survey, and I said, have you received any confirmation on whether it would start in July and doing 11 months tuition payments? And he said that he has not received any confirmation of that happening.
Had he heard of any Catholic schools potentially closing as a result of COVID?
No.
Okay.
He did not. He told me he didn't hear of any. But he did say, because I had asked him, I was like, are there some parents that are just going to, maybe even rely on homeschooling altogether or take their students out? And he said that some parents are going to have trouble making ends meet with tuition and making the payments. So he has heard that some parents may be pulling their children out of private schools and public and Catholic schools because they just won't be able to afford it.
Right. Well, Adriana, that's why we wanted to bring you on, to kind of give you a chance to share with the audience some of the things that you've worked on and will be working on. So I definitely appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you when you get in.
Yeah. Well, hey, we'll see you in a few minutes.
All right. Bye, guys.
You hang up first. All right.
Okay. Wash your hands.
Yeah, wash your hands. 8:18. Hey, we got to do news and stuff, and we got the superintendent of the Guam Department of Education, John Fernandez, coming up, so we'll take a little break. It's the KUAM News Takeover, Guam's favorite, containing COVID. Good morning.
Banners, posters, stickers.
Keeping you informed, KUAM News brings you Banking 671, brought to you by the Bank of Guam, the People's Bank,